Every piece of poetry I've ever written has been a part of me. Tiny slivers of my hopes and dreams, aspirations of leaving, the only air I could breathe when my reality was suffocating. My struggle, my confusion, and my anger lay hidden beneath words, similes, metaphors, never seen by others. Every line, each stanza, acted as a bolt, used to lock away what made me unhappy. I threw away the key and tried to forget what could only be known as haunting. In the process, I lost pieces of myself, until the most common lines in each of my poems were, "I feel so lost and I want to run away." Today, I want to break open the parts of myself that have always remained hidden. So let's begin. I'm 17, I have one dimple in my right cheek, and I'm supposed to wear glasses, but I'm scared that if the apocalypse were to happen, somehow I trip and crack my lenses, leaving me unable to see the zombies, because I'm that clumsy. I don't have a dad worth remembering, and most of my childhood is buried so deep inside of me, I couldn't tell you what I did most days. I can say that I remember the bad days so much more than the good ones. My mom is two parents rolled into one, and she tried to make my world as beautiful as she could, her road paved with every difficulty traveled alone, something that has only made her completely human in my eyes, prone to mistakes and irrationality. I have a crazy older brother that I love very much, and when I was growing up, he would force me to play fight with him. Somehow, though, he always ended up being the super ninja and I the villain, an arrangement that constantly left me on the floor crying, screaming, "Mom!" Yes, I was that younger sibling. When I started this project, it was a challenge to say everything I've always been scared to utter aloud. I wanted to find the voice I'd always restrained, the voice I'd excused myself from using, because I was scared. Like many people, I chose to use silence as a safety net. I kept fear close with images of extreme consequences and comforted myself with the thought that one day, when I began anew, far, far away, I'd find that voice I'd always kept away for safekeeping. But what I've realized is that part of being on the brink, looking at a new beginning, is coming to terms with everything that seems to pull me back from taking a step forward. So this is a story of poetry and I. When I was in the 5th grade, I wrote a poem about love, even though I've never been in love, but it was 4 lines of what I thought love should be. That's when poetry became an acquaintance. In the 7th grade, I had a bunch of poems, a bouquet of my beliefs. I showed a few of my friends, and they'd read the words in the beginning, laughing, as if my thoughts, my emotions were some type of joke. That's when I stopped showing people my therapy. Why would I when they couldn't take my vulnerability seriously? I learned later that these were just my excuses to hide. In high school, every year my world changed. People fell from their long-held pedestals, my brother left me for his future, and suddenly I felt so utterly alone. I kept fighting for some type of peace. I just wanted to be happy. That's when poetry became my escape. It's what I used to cope with how low I felt. It was a place where I could scream and say what I could never repeat. As a senior, I have learned how much it has hurt me to keep everything inside. That even as I walk these halls and practically live in this windowless building, I've missed out by living my life as the girl half known. So this is my journey to using spoken word poetry to find a voice I never thought I would have the courage to use in my present. For as long as I can remember, I've hidden who I was from those around me. I've been scared of making choices that would disappoint those that I love, scared of talking about what I know. I would always base what I would do on what others would want from me. I think about who I was in terms of, what other people would want. And when I started to think about what I would do for my senior exhibition project, I would think back to the summer that I spent at Yale, the week in the summer that I spent at Yale, where I went to a spoken word workshop. And I remember watching these videos of these spoken word artists, and they were just so passionate and so emotional and so willing to be vulnerable to people that they didn't even know. And I was jealous of that. I wanted to do that. I wanted to inspire someone through a TV, through a video, or by performing in front of them. I wanted to do that for somebody else. And so I decided that I would do spoken word because of that. Because spoken word is, to me, about emotion. It's about passion. It's about showing people who you are and not caring what they think. It's just revealing everything. And I've never done that before, but I wanted to. I wanted to be inspirational and be emotional and be passionate and just share my story with other people and not be scared of them being disappointed in me or them rejecting what I was saying. So for those of you that don't know, what exactly is spoken word? Some people associate it with, people ranting about politics, and some people associate it with people crying about, their lives and things like that. But most people associate it with emotion. And formally, it's sort of known as being the offspring of theater and poetry, that if theater and poetry got together and had a baby, that would be spoken word. And when you think about it, that's kind of what it is. What I do is a very, very novice version of that because I'm still learning. Even though I've spent the year doing spoken word or trying to do spoken word, it has honestly been a really big learning curve because I don't know how to do it very well. I'm not a professional, but I hope to one day be. So what exactly did I learn from this? I learned that I'm a planner, that the reason why I hesitated in doing spoken word before is because I like to plan things out and know what's going to happen and plan out my speeches and figure out what I'm going to say. And spoken word isn't about that. It's about delivering this poem and having no idea what people are going to think of it or what people are going to think of you. And that's why I always hesitated in doing it. And I realized that I grew away from that, or I tried to grow away from it, because I went back to Yale and they had another spoken word workshop. And this was completely random and I had no idea this was going to happen. But I went and they had an open mic and I went and I performed for this open mic in front of a crowd of strangers. And it was completely random. And I was telling them about my life and I was telling them, how I felt and how angry I was and how frustrated I was. And it just felt so crazy because I had no idea that I was going to do something like that. And honestly, it wasn't something that I would have ever done prior to doing this project. So the whole purpose of my project was finding my voice in the sense, it sounds kind of corny, but in the sense that, I would stand up for myself and I would finally talk to people about what I knew and who I was and what I believed in. And do I honestly believe that I found my voice? I think that I found a part of it. I think that that it's always something that you learn as you go along in life. And I think that I'm still learning about it. But I think that I'm on the right path. And ultimately, what do I know because of this project? I know that it's easy to brush what you want under the rug, and it's easy to do things based off of what other people want for you. But life is about living for me and for living for you and not living for other people. Okay. 17 years ago, an egg encountered a tadpole. A bird and a bee fell in love. Two parts came together to make a whole, me. The last puzzle piece needed to complete my family, the perfect picturesque American dream. A man, a woman, an older brother, and a pink-faced little girl living together in a white house. When I was 5, my picture-perfect puzzle broke. The smiling dad disappeared, leaving behind memories as keepsakes of warring voices, slammed doors, pounding hearts, and an older brother putting his ear to the door, telling me to be quiet so he could listen. I saw how much that man that looked just like me had hurt my mom, could remember the lies he'd say to slander her name, how he'd call the cops in an attempt to take her away, how we went homeless for a few days because of him and his irrational brain. But when he called me his baby girl, when he twirled me around and threatened to hurt anyone that tried to break me, when I looked in the mirror and saw how we could be twins, when I smiled, revealing an identical cheek resting on my right that lived on his left, I missed him. My desire to hate him lived and breathed inside. Hate that he couldn't love me enough to try to stay in my life. Hate that he couldn't grow up. Hate that he used more time drinking and using drugs than worrying about us. I wanted to blame him for how my mom seemed to break down from the stress of being a single parent. Blame him for always yelling at my brother first, threatening to hurt him so much more than he deserved. Blame him for being the first to teach me about how you can't trust everyone in this world. But I couldn't God, I couldn't. Because every time I watched a movie where a girl exclaimed, "Daddy," I think of how different my life could have been. When I imagined my 15, when I imagined walking down the aisle, when I screamed because a cockroach was coming, when I got into the college of my dreams, when I worried about boys, I just wanted my dad to be there. The man that loved me more than he loved being a deadbeat. The man that he could never step up enough to be. I grew up strong, I grew up independent, with a mom that was two parents rolled into one, who had to be the gift giver and the punisher all at once. Single parents have the hardest job of them all. I see it every time the bills need to get paid, when my mom has to stand up strong under the pressure of what would make most people lean. I forgive my dad for leaving. I forgive him for not being able to be what I need. And I forgive him for ruining the chance for me to have all those classic daddy-daughter memories. Because in the end, the woman that I am becoming came in large part from not having him there. So while we may appear to share a striking resemblance, I find peace in knowing that the outside is where it ends. Because inside, I know I am so much more than he could ever hope to be. I don't want to live in the past anymore. Goodbye, Daddy. Thank you for listening.